when you asked me to do an invocation, I, of course, became very reflective. And so I decided to call this a reflection, because what I want to share in my reflection today is to focus on the broader context of Raj Yoga and what it brings to our lives at a time in which there's so much that's happening to deconstruct our inner lives. It's as though we watch the outer world falling apart, but there's a lot of our inner world that is also falling apart. So I wanted to focus my reflections on Raj Yoga today. And so I will speak it very slowly because I want it to be a reflection. I want us to take these words, or I'm inviting you to take these words into the innermost parts of our souls and to look at it as a reconstructive process, as a process, if we pay attention to it, can actually impact what's going on in the outer world. Raj Yoga is a way to provide spiritual skills, and it encourages personal efforts with the aim to increase a sense of self-worth. Who am I? As well as a feeling of belonging. I am not alone. Raj Yoga meditation focuses on the original and natural qualities innate in the soul, that authentic being. In exploring these virtues, one is able to disconnect from the damaging patterns of behavior, from negative thoughts, from frustrated feelings, and from active and passive aggressive reactions. When stability is anchored in inner strength, this is flexibility and resilience, and they work as spiritual skills. The soul is bigger than the mind. If there's illness in the mind, the soul can heal the mind. Raj Yoga aligns the awareness, the attitude, the vision, and the action of the practitioner. This spiritual trajectory of awareness, attitude, vision, and action, when connected to the original virtues within the soul, fills the being up with inner peace and willpower, and creates a sense of calmness and confidence. This reduces the dependency on external circumstances and situations, as well as it reduces the rising levels of fears, anxiety that manifests as life's stressors, causing depression, anger, worry, and frustration. Raj Yoga is very helpful as a prevention and recovery practice for distorted cognitions, lack of self-esteem, and emotional lows. It focuses on self-change, leading to a mastery in challenging external situations. It acts as a preventative strategy for some forms of mental illness. Raj Yoga includes other modalities of well-being. This process of self-growth and healing needs guidance. It needs support. It needs role modeling. And it needs to remind people that every challenge provides an opportunity. And that opportunity becomes a reality when I am in the company of like-minded people. Foundational to Raj Yoga is connection and communion with the higher source. This union provides protection, safety, love, care, and compassion. Essential nutrients for mental and emotional healing. Om Shanti, and thank you.
Essential nutrients. Thank you so much, Gayatri. That was beautiful. And I do want to say, I think that the energy really seems to have become stronger. And part of that is because as I see people who have joined with us today, we have, I think, a dedicated group of people who are yoga practitioners, who are meditators later on in the program. And I'd like to go back to our Vice Chair, Gayatri Naraine, who can elaborate a little bit more from her remarks in the invocation, and also share with us from her particular perspective. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Denise. I thought my reflection said it all, because in the reflection, I tried to show the broad range of when one practices a certain type of yoga. It is not just connected to the yoga itself. For instance, if I practice yoga by certain sutras, it is not the sutras. The sutras are an aid to something that gets developed within me. And I think that that is the purpose of yoga. And what has been happening for me during the days of COVID is COVID is an invisible enemy. COVID is something that is so threatening to so many of us. However, COVID is also an opportunity, because the opportunity here is people are left with themselves. And whether it's social distancing or whatever we want to call it. And I think within that space of being left with myself, if I'm a practitioner of yoga, it assures me of two things. One is, in that space of being by myself, I'm not alone. Because yoga, the whole thing of yoga is connection. It is connecting me. So how do I connect regardless of being alone? And I feel it does create a sense of community, because then I become creative in the way I would reach out and connect to others. Whether I could do it through a device, that's good. But when I cannot do it through a device, I can connect to others at the level of thought and feelings. And that could actually give me a tremendous amount of reassurance that being alone is really not being alone, because that's not possible within my, as the World Health Organization says, within a social setting. Because I think even though they don't have a category for spiritual, spirituality as a modality, it does fit within the relational, which is the social. And so I think that's an element within yoga that needs to be developed. And that is, I'm never alone, because I can choose to connect at a very subtle level. The other is, I feel that when the body says no, when the body is no longer able to do the things that I have become dependent on it to do, then what do? Do I become a victim of my body, or do I recognize this union between the body and the soul? Now, perhaps the body is saying to the soul, I have done as much as I can for you. Now I'm saying no. For instance, I can't breathe. I have been affected by something like COVID, and now I cannot breathe for you. You are going to have to help me breathe. So the body needs that assistance. So this is where I think the awareness connected to my action is very important, that I now become aware of a need that my body requires from I, the soul. So what do? I will work with some of my inner spiritual skills so that I can reinforce a confidence, first of all, within myself, that I can now help my body heal. And so the breathing exercises, which is very important as part of the pranayama, as part of the hatha yoga, will be as effective as I am in terms of my spirit, in terms of my being, of applying that breathing exercise from the level of awareness to the level of the action, the actual act of doing it. And I think it is within these kinds of connections between what is mortal and what is immortal that I have to now make the adjustments. Because for me, one of the lessons that we're learning in our world today is that we have been living as mortal beings, striving for immortality. Now I think the adjustment or the twist is, I am an immortal being living in a mortal world. And so I have to bring the spiritual skills, and I have to bring the spiritual modality of immortality to give life back to that which is immortal, and which is that which is mortal and that which is dying. And I think it is only the yoga and the principles and qualities and practice of yoga that could re-establish in us this sense of an integral being, because we just can't live as mortal beings. We have to make the adjustments and return to being that immortal being, and bring back all those qualities or the yogic principles and the yogic values back into this place of mortality, the elements, the world. So I would say that my reflection was really pushing these kinds of areas that we do need to look at, and we need to look at it as a strategy within the structure of mental illness. Because if we are going to look at mental illness, then we know that the life force that will affect the mind is something that's lying innate within me. And the strength I will need to activate that life force within me that could make a difference to all the ailments that are associated with the mental illness area will come also when I reach out to a higher source. And so for me, meditation is not just, or yoga is not just connecting to what is inside of me, but to activate that, to have a regenerative kind of approach is when I also reach out to a higher source. You call that higher source God, divine, the one, whatever. And that is the life force that will correct, will do the transformation that is required at this time in our world and in our lives. Thank you.